This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. With more properties for sale than anywhere else, we make it easier.
Welcome back. Let's check on the auction market. Around the country, there are 2,056 auctions scheduled this weekend. 580 auctions are planned for Sydney, 720 all up in New South Wales. That's down 7% year on year. Victoria, your auctions are down 20% year on year. 871 scheduled this weekend, with most of those in Melbourne. South Australia, 124 for you, with most being held in Adelaide. WA, your planned auctions are up this weekend with 17 on the cards. There's 263 in Queensland, and the nation's capital has 60 auctions scheduled. Let's take a look at the most viewed properties going to auction this weekend. First up, we have 63 Lansdowne Road, St Kilda East in Melbourne. This four-bedder has a price guide of about $1 to $1.1 million. Next up, it's 38 Christabel Crescent, Hawthorn, also Melbourne. This five-bedder sits on about 830 square metres, has a price guide of $6.5 to $7 million. Then it's 28 Gardner Street, Richmond, also Melbourne. Three-bedder hasn't been on the market in 75 years. Price guide is $700 to $770,000. Then we've got 39 Golden Grove, Glen Waverley, also Melbourne. This four-bedder has a price guide of $1.4 to $1.57 million. And rounding out the list, surprise, surprise, it's another Melbourne home. This one is at 2 Moresby Street, Canterbury. This three-bedder has a price guide of up to $1.65 million. And the most viewed property on REA Group website this week has just been placed under offer today, but we have to show you anyway. This home in the small Victorian country town of Beulah is located about 200 kilometres south of Mildura. It's being billed as Victoria's cheapest home, with the vendors asking just $49,000 for the five-bedder. The address is 70 Henty Highway, Beulah. And here's the real estate agent giving you a little tour and pointing out a couple of the flaws.
Fair bit of evidence of white ants. And every room, I'll go as far as saying every room has at least one broken window. So this is bedroom 3. Not sure about the wiring, how good that is. Doesn't look professionally done, so.
And for more on property, I spoke with REA's Angus a little earlier.
We're certainly seeing quite a lot of activity this weekend, which we have throughout much of May, to be honest. Not as much as we were seeing in March, which is what we'd expect to see. March is normally the peak of the autumn selling season, and May will be a little bit quieter. That said, we're not seeing as much as we did last year, though last year was a very busy year in property markets, so it's maybe not a surprise.
Got clearance rates, though. They seem to be holding up pretty strongly for this time of the year.
Yeah, they certainly are. We've been seeing kind of high 60s in Sydney and Melbourne throughout much of May, which is pretty good, really. Again, it's not as good as we were seeing in sort of spring 2021, though, that was an incredibly hot period and we were seeing incredibly strong conditions across the country. So maybe a bit of a false comparison there. But, the good news for sellers is we are seeing much better conditions than we were late last year when the RBA was raising interest rates very quickly. We had a lot of hesitancy in the market and clearance rates are much lower than what we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, so from the seller perspective, property prices have been tracking up. So is there a lot more confidence coming back to sellers?
Yeah, it's a great question. We probably haven't seen it translate much into market activity thus far. Market activity, at least in April, was fairly quiet, and May has picked up a bit, but is slower than what we were seeing last year. So I think it'll be starting to have an impact, and the fact that we're probably close to peak on interest rates will be starting to give people a bit more confidence about the future as well. So that's probably a bit of a tailwind for the rest of this year, but we haven't probably seen it translating into market activity as much as we were 12 to 18 months ago.
And I believe properties are taking a little bit longer to sell at the moment. So I guess from a buyer perspective, there's almost more stock available to browse on the market right now.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We're seeing properties take a bit longer to sell than was the case 12 to 18 months ago. And that means that while we have seen fewer new properties hitting the market, if you open up realestate.com.au today, there are actually more total properties available than was the case 12 months ago. And that's simply a fact that things are sticking around a bit longer. Gives buyers a little bit more choice, not having to make as quick decisions. So, that's certainly good news for buyers, particularly compared to pretty tough conditions, what we were seeing 12 to 18 months ago.
And website traffic at the moment, how's it tracking?
We're still seeing pretty strong demand from buyers, at least relative to the number of listings that we're seeing on realestate.com.au. So we track kind of the way that people are interacting with listings and look at people that are genuinely very engaged and look like they're trying to buy a home. And It's not what it was 12 months ago, but it's much stronger than what we were seeing in 2019.
Shifting to the rental market, I know you guys put out a sub $400 rental report recently. Can you just talk me through the key points from that?
Yeah, so we had a report out this week looking at what you might think of more affordable rentals, so those listed under $400. It's a bit of an arbitrary number, but it's a nice way to kind of think about the problem. What it's showing is that it is a real problem, affordability at the moment. The number of rentals listed under $400 a week across the country is just 16%, which is nearly half what it was a year ago when it was 30%. So pretty tough conditions for renters at that lower end of the market.
And that 16% level, that's really due to landlords raising rents across the country to deal with all the economic challenges that we're seeing in the economy.
Yeah, exactly right. The reason that we've seen that kind of decrease in the bottom tail in terms of the number of renters in that more affordable bracket is just that rents have been rising across the board very, very quickly. And the reason for that is there's just not a lot of rentals around, really, no matter where you look across the country. Rental vacancy rates are extremely low in almost all parts of the country. Regional, capital city, doesn't matter. It's very tough conditions for renters at the moment.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago during the pandemic, we were talking about everyone moving out of the cities, going to the regional areas, and rents in those places went up astronomically. But is there now a big shift back towards the CBDs and the cities and capitals?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's certainly, everyone's been expecting to see it. We're probably seeing it in some areas, but I don't think universally across regional areas. We have seen a bit of an improvement in regional vacancy rates. So they're up to about 1.5% at the moment, and they were, low 1% a year ago. But 1.5% is still very, very tight, and it's not a big increase. So it's better, but it's not good. Now, if we're looking at where we've seen the biggest increases in vacancy rates and where we might be seeing that kind of shift back to the cities, it is some of those more lifestyle regions. Places like Byron Bay, we have seen a bigger increase in vacancy rates and a bigger fall in home prices than some of the regional centres, places like Newcastle or Geelong.
And Adelaide and Perth, how tight are the rental markets there?
It's very tough times for renters in Adelaide and Perth at the moment. Vacancy rates there are both sub 1%, which is extremely low. And as a result, rents are growing pretty quickly in both cities. They've been popular over the past year, and Adelaide's been popular throughout the pandemic. They do remain a bit more affordable than our larger capitals, particularly Adelaide, which is one of the cities with a bit more available in that sub $400 range. Even so, it's much lower than it was pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, it was something like 60% of rentals were sub $400. Today, it's only about 1 in 5.
Angus Small from REA Group, thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.